And good morning, DawgNation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We are happy to have you with us here today. So much to do on our program. Terrence Edwards, of course, stops by here. We're going to have a great conversation with Terrence coming up, as we always do on a Thursday. And I believe for the first time in DawgNation Daily history, we're also going to have a one-on-one interview with Kirby Smart recorded last night about the event that was going on, of course. So we're not doing like Brock Bowers' injury and stuff like that. But I had a chance to talk to Kirby last night for a couple of minutes. And for those of you that want to see kind of a little bit different side of Kirby Smart, today's the day to see that. Very relaxed, kind of in a good mood, and obviously in great support of a great cause, which we will also tell you about more coming up here in just a moment, too. And another guy we talked to last night will also be a subject of our show today for a different reason. I want to revisit something that David Pollack, you heard him say on yesterday's show, upcoming games for Georgia, how to make sure the Dogs are as ready as they possibly can be for this big stretch run that's on the way. Cocktail party, then after that, big games that David specifically highlighted a little earlier this week. So we'll talk about some of that. And Georgia got some great recruiting news yesterday. We should not lose sight of this. And so we'll take some time to celebrate that there as well. Good to have you with us here on this Thursday. Glad to have had you last night with us for the Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl with Coach Rick. And, of course, you can continue to help him raise money for Parkinson's disease research and Crohn's disease research when you go to ricksdogbowl.com. We'll tell you more about that in a moment, though. But for now, let's get it started. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
A lot of thank yous to give out as we get rolling here today. First of all, thank you to everyone who tuned in last night for the Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl with former Georgia coach Mark Richt, an entire collection of current and former Georgia players, Kirby Smart himself, everybody on hand to help raise money for Parkinson's disease research, Crohn's disease research. For all of you who watch that at DawgNation.com, thank you so much for doing that. To the entire team here at DawgNation that helped us put this on, obviously I'm always so appreciative of them. You know, you see my loud mouth and fat face on camera all the time, but what you don't realize is whether it be, you know, folks back here in our Atlanta studio like Michael Carvel or an entire just team of people on site there at the bowling alley there in Athens, it takes a lot to do something like that, especially when it's a little bit unorthodox, the kind of thing that we had not really done before, that almost no one's done before, that kind of live stream for that long of a period of time. I'm so appreciative of all the people who helped make that go the way that it did. And I personally, once again, want to thank Mark Richt and his family for allowing DawgNation to be a part of this. You know, I am so proud of that because obviously I just, believe in what the Richt family stood for. And seeing them up close and personal, you're just reminded of they are the real deal. Mark Richt is the real deal, that the persona that he's projected in our lives for these decades is the way that he is in these moments too. And obviously he's in a fight right now with Parkinson's disease. And we know how challenging that can be. And yet you continue to see Richt be Richt even through all of this. So I was so moved by that. I am so grateful for those of you who've, joined the show and gave last night. We're going to encourage you to continue to do that here today. The website to go to is ricksdogbowl.com. That's RICHTS, ricksdogbowl.com. Of course, dog spelled DAWG. And as a reminder about why this is such an important thing, before we're done on our show today, coming up here in just a few minutes, in fact, had a chance last night to spend a little bit of time with Georgia coach Kirby Smart. I believe that's our first one-on-one interview with Kirby. Of course, it's about the event itself, and it's about what the Richt family has meant to him, but it's still a great chance to see a great side of Kirby Smart that we don't often get to see because he's very busy being the football coach of Georgia 99% of the time. But in this particular case, got to kind of pull back from that a little bit and just be kind of one of the folks there at the bowling alley. And that was kind of a cool thing to see. So we'll show you some of that on our show here coming up in a moment. Of course, prior to all of that, we got some business to take care of. And one of the guys that we talked to last night was David Pollack. And David's obviously always a great guest. And David was a little bit of a subject on our show yesterday there as well. He was on the Dan Patrick radio program, and he was kind of, chatting up, kind of a lot of things as it related to Georgia. And there was one thing that David said about future Georgia opponents that I think we ought to visit here for a moment. David was talking about the Georgia defense and kind of what that unit looks like right now, as you see a lot of guys from the 2021 and 2022 teams who've now moved on to the NFL, and perhaps a little bit of a compound interest here starting to take shape in terms of what Georgia's lost off the last two defenses with how this unit's playing here in 2023 and the challenge that unit could face here moving forward with upcoming football games. Not just cocktail party next Saturday, but then after that. In fact, it was a couple of games beyond that David specifically cited in the clip we played for you yesterday from his interview earlier this week with the Dan Patrick radio program. So let me let you hear this Pollack clip again. If you listened to yesterday's show, you heard that. But I want to take a slightly different angle on this based on something that David said. So let's hear this, and then we'll kind of dive into what really is next for Georgia and what we believe is an incredibly challenging slate of upcoming games. This is what David Pollack recently said about that.
You don't have runs like that. All of those guys that you saw during those 2-year run, they're all playing on Sundays. If you turn the tape on, you start watching Sundays, oh yeah, I remember that guy. That guy played defense at Georgia. That guy played defense at Georgia. I mean, all 11 of the defensive starters for the first national championship, they all got drafted. So, I mean, it's going to look different. But if you look at the schedule, Ole Miss is going to be a problem. A running quarterback with a system that can also run the football, throw the football a little bit more. But again, that's at home. Missouri is their next toughest game. That's at home. So it is a tough place to go to walk into with that crowd, that noise, that atmosphere. It's tough for anybody to go in there and win.
I've talked to a lot of Georgia fans here this week, and one of the things that you commonly hear, and it feels like we sort of hear this time of year every year, is the idea of, oh my gosh, I am so ready to just sort of sit home on a Saturday and kick back and watch a bunch of college football, which is not the same thing as saying that Georgia fans don't enjoy traveling to see the Dogs play or spending their Saturdays in Athens. Of course we love that. It's our probably number one pastime for most of us. But it's also kind of nice to have that Saturday where you don't have to think about a Georgia game. You can just watch the other college football games that are taking place. But as David says right there, though, as you're doing that, perhaps you do it with a little bit of a homework assignment in mind. If you want to do some early scouting about what Georgia's remaining slate looks like, this upcoming Saturday, I think, gives you an idea of that. You hear David say, hey, I think Ole Miss can be a problem for Georgia coming up as a big home game against a ranked opponent in the month of November. Well, guess what? We get to see Ole Miss on the road on Saturday, too, at Jordan-Hare Stadium. That's a place that Georgia's already played here this year. We know how tough it can be. And there's the kind of interesting wrinkle, too, of homecoming here of sorts. You know, Hugh Freeze will be at home, but playing against his old school in Ole Miss. So how much of a problem, so to speak, could Ole Miss be for Georgia? The game against Auburn on Saturday, I think, tells you a lot about that. I know a lot of Georgia fans are really, really excited about tuning in and seeing some of that. And at this point in time, I don't even think that Missouri is necessarily flying under the radar for Georgia fans anymore. Perhaps nationally, I don't think people realize just how big on paper Georgia-Missouri could be coming up the week after the Georgia-Florida game. But another chance to see, is Missouri, air quotes here, for real? Is Missouri capable of keeping it going? Obviously, they've been winning football games. They get South Carolina on Saturday. That's a home game for the Tigers there. Luther Burden's had a great year. Did not have probably the best game against Kentucky. I don't think that Brady Cook, the quarterback for Missouri, has also had probably a better year than I expected him to have. I don't think he had his best game against Kentucky either. But can they get back to that? That's another one of those opponents you heard David Pollack sort of mention by name upcoming here for Georgia. Seeing how they play against an SEC opponent on Saturday, albeit a scuffling one in South Carolina, nonetheless, that kind of gives you an idea of what the future Georgia schedule can look like. The team that David doesn't mention, which is also probably on your mind in the biggest game of all on Saturday, is Alabama hosting Tennessee. And what's weird here is we're going to talk more about this as we kind of roll into tomorrow. I've got another note on this game before we're done at today's show. But tomorrow, I think the point I'm going to make about the Alabama-Tennessee game is that quietly, Tennessee has probably played as well as, if not better, than Alabama all year long. And I don't know that they've probably been given credit for that. And I don't necessarily know that means they win this game on Saturday. But by perception, I think a lot of people assume that Alabama is far better than Tennessee is. But actual performance, I'm not quite so sure, that's necessarily the case. So David says, hey, look at that Ole Miss game. That could be a problem for Georgia. Keep your eye on Missouri. I would add Tennessee to that there as well. And, of course, all of those future Georgia opponents have pretty big SEC games on Saturday, which gives us a pretty big measuring stick for kind of how all this stands. Now, what David said was also kind of in light of what's currently going on with the Georgia defense. And we've admittedly said this, that right now it sort of seems like Georgia perhaps has a defense that's a little bit more in keeping with what you would expect from a good team in college football, a contending team, a good quality team in college football, but certainly perhaps not the same kind of replica of the larger-than-life, truly awesome defense that's been the definition of these two last great Georgia teams that have won the national championship. Georgia may be a little bit more normal for a good team as opposed to the abnormal outlier quality of defense these last two great Georgia teams have had. Now, it remains to be seen whether that be proven true or not, but it has certainly appeared to possibly be true based on the 7 games that we've just seen. Giving up 20 points against Missouri this past Saturday is kind of an example of why that is. But let me go under the hood here for a moment and try to keep this as sort of simple and easy to understand as possible about why that maybe some of the Georgia defensive issues have been perhaps overstated. Not to say that there aren't reasonable room for concern. Of course there is. But the idea that this is a Georgia defense that can still figure it out against these pretty good offensive teams, Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee in their own right, they have at least capable offensive play caller minds, running those offenses with the 3 head coaches of Heupel and Kiffin and Eli Drinkwitz. With these upcoming games against what can be formidable offenses, I think there's still an opportunity for the Georgia defense to show what it's all about. In fact, you want to go back to that Vanderbilt game for a moment. While it's true that Georgia gave up 20 points, which is a little bit of an eye-opening number against a team like Vanderbilt, the truth is Georgia only gave up 219 yards. Now, I would ask you, which of those numbers is probably worse on the game day? Well, obviously, it's the 20 points allowed. But which of those numbers is more predictive moving forward? I'd say the 219 yards may be a little bit more predictive moving forward because in most games, if you only give up 219 yards, you're probably not giving up 20 points. Georgia's had some red zone breakdowns defensively a few times this year. Kirby Smart, I know, has addressed that. We may hear Kirby on that again tomorrow. We may revisit this topic a little bit. But ultimately, the overall sort of basic counting stats for Georgia defensively actually remain pretty solid. Georgia's still, even after giving up 20 on Saturday, tied for 7th nationally, allowing 14 points per game. And maybe even more important than that, they're 8th nationally right now in yards per play allowed, giving up just 4.39 yards per play. So this seems like it's, oh my gosh, what's happened to the Georgia defense? This isn't 2021 anymore. There's no Nolan Smith or Jalen Carter. This isn't 2022 anymore. But actually, compared to most teams, Georgia's still pretty good defensively. Now, do you need to be better than pretty good with Brock Bowers not playing and what Georgia's about to face? Maybe you do, but the opportunity to still raise the level of play for Georgia defensively, I think it still exists, even if some of us are coming to grips with the idea of this unit may not quite be as dominant as it's been in the past. Now, let me say one more thing on this topic, then we're going to change the subject. The other point that David made there, and I think this is something that every Georgia fan needs to take to heart, the 2 games that David cited specifically that could be challenging for Georgia, Ole Miss coming up, Missouri coming up. It's Missouri first at home, then Ole Miss after that. Y'all, those are home games. And as David said, hey, it's going to be tough for either of those 2 teams to come into Athens, face not just that Georgia team, but that Georgia crowd, and also walk away a winner or walk away taking a bite out of Georgia. That's going to be a tough thing for either of those teams to do, which tells you everything you need to know right now about the reputation that's been established for Georgia fans. It's been well-earned because of Kentucky game this year and Tennessee game last year, Arkansas game the year before that, and on you go. The Georgia fans have met the moment every time they've been asked to do so. And in these upcoming games, you better believe that's going to be the case once again. There's a very good chance that both these games are really big when they're played. We've said this now for a little bit. It's at least possible that Georgia-Missouri is a primetime game on CBS, one of the bigger games in the SEC this season, perhaps, assuming both these teams continue to keep winning. Missouri, obviously, a couple of games, Georgia next Saturday against Florida, giving you a chance to do that. It could perhaps overtake Alabama-LSU, depending on how those 2 teams continue to operate as that primetime game on CBS. Maybe it doesn't happen, perhaps it will. Either way, Georgia fans going to be called upon to make a big atmosphere. The same thing's true for Ole Miss, too. If Ole Miss keeps winning, Lane Kiffin brings a lot of attention with him. That could be a very big game. Georgia crowd going to be called on in a very big way. My guess is they'll be more than ready for that task. Interesting to hear David Pollack looking ahead to some of those big up-and-coming games. Cocktail party on Saturday, then the slate after that. Things are about to get really interesting for UGA. Let me switch gears to this for a moment. Yesterday, Georgia got some very good news on the recruiting front. And it's weird because we're in the bye week. We had Rick's Dog Bowl last night. There's a lot of stuff going on. It can be easy to overlook this, but you shouldn't. Georgia has flipped a 4-star defensive back, Andre Evans, out of Nashville, Tennessee, from LSU. Now, the overall numbers on Evans tells you a pretty good story here. He's ranked as the number 152 player in the overall 24/7 sports composite, meaning I think he's close to top 100 on 24/7 overall, but in the 24/7 composite, which averages together all of the various recruiting rankings, you're talking about a guy who comes in like 152 on the composite. This is a big-time win for Georgian recruiting, going head-to-head against LSU to bring him home. And right now, listen, DBU at LSU is not what it once was. They are in desperate need of defensive backs, and Evans was supposed to be one of their guys, and Fran Brown swoops in, maintains good contact with Evans, and puts himself in a position to win this recruiting battle. So, I don't have a ton to say on this other than it's really good news. And I think for those of us who, have enjoyed this run, this ride that Georgia's been on, I think the Evans commitment's a perfect example here of, and even what's supposed to be the so-called slow week, even what's supposed to be the so-called week where nothing's going on, everybody's getting away and going on vacation and going to the pumpkin patch or whatever it is that we're supposed to be doing on a week like this, Georgia is still business as usual, and business remains good. 4-star cornerback flipped from LSU, DBU taking the L to UGA, a darn near top 100 rated prospect. That's a pretty nice piece of news for Georgia on a bye week. Fran Brown continues to be one of the rising stars in the coaching world. Georgia's lucky to have him. And Andre Evans, I would say, as a recent commit to UGA, Dog's pretty lucky to have him too. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Don't forget, Kirby Smart here coming up in just a moment. Fun conversation we were able to have with Kirby last night. Of course, for those of you who joined us last night on DawgNation.com, we're glad to have you here. And for those of you who watch on DawgNation Daily right now, we're glad you're here there as well. Other podcasts and video platforms, thank you so much for just choosing something that works for you, some way to connect with the show. We're just really glad you do. Our friends in Athens on the radio as well, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. That is really good. And all of this would not be possible without a great sponsor like our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. We call them your source for Georgia divorce. And what we mean by that is, as they stretch across all the state of Georgia now, and they've got some brand new office locations that are about to open up, and I can't wait to tell you more about this because, for a long time we've kind of thought of Merriweather and Tharp as kind of like a really important resource for those facing divorce here in the Atlanta area, but they're actually extending beyond that now. Great offices opening up outside the Atlanta area. We're going to be telling you a lot more about that in the days to come. That's why we're giving you a brand new website to think about when you think about Merriweather and Tharp. It's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. And one of the reasons why Merriweather and Tharp has grown the way that it has to be able to expand outside the Atlanta area throughout the state is because of the creative way in which they approach the divorce process. Because the thing they understand is there are a couple of things that are kind of top of mind for you when it comes to a divorce process. First of all, it's scary, confusing. They acknowledge that, and that's why they want to help you in what might be one of the most challenging times you ever go through. But in addition to that, they also understand that you want this to be as sort of stress-free as it possibly can be, and you want to have some sort of idea about what all of this costs. And that's what Merriweather and Tharp kind of understands. The way to make the divorce process as affordable and cost-effective for you as it possibly can be, and to give you kind of a range of options, because in this day and age, everybody sort of wants that range of options, that sort of range of choices. Once again, that's what Merriweather and Tharp can provide you as well. They've got a deal, do-it-yourself divorce type option that you can get for as low as $99. They've got Merriweather and Tharp Assisted, which can be done for as low as $1,749, and an option that I think really kind of combines the best of a lot of options here. And this may be the coolest new thing that Merriweather and Tharp is rolling out for those who are considering the divorce process, or for those who realize the divorce process is an unavoidable reality for them. It's what they call their Model M&T service, which includes a payment plan and traditional coverage, if you'd like, for those complex divorces there as well. So all kinds of great options available for you right now with Merriweather and Tharp. I want you to check out their website. It's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Obviously, they know how scary and confusing the divorce process can be, And while that may be true for you, finding your way to a successful outcome on the other side of that is very much possible when you get the unparalleled service that Meriwether and Tharp provides and the really creative way in which Meriwether and Tharp allows you to make sense of all this, but also understand kind of what you're looking at from a financial commitment standpoint. They can tell you more about that. So please find them online, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That's GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. And don't forget, Meriwether and Tharp, also proud partners of the Georgia Bulldogs as well. All right, speaking of the Georgia Bulldogs, let's get ready to go around the doghouse here, presented by Serve Pro. And the head dog himself is Kirby Smart. And Kirby, we know how busy he is. Georgia just got a major flip yesterday. They're obviously working, as you transition to the sort of back half of the week to start getting ready for Florida next Saturday. You know how important people like me think that game is, and Kirby Smart also understands the value of the rivalry there as well. So he is busy at work for a game plan to defeat those lousy, stinking Gators. And yet still last night, he was kind enough to be a part of the Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl with Mark Richt and his family, and also kind enough to join us on DawgNation too, which was an incredibly, incredibly generous act of his time because we know how limited it is. So I wanted to give you a chance to see that in support of the great night for Mark Richt, a very different side of Kirby Smart than we often get a chance to see, in a great mood and having a good time. And if you're a Georgia fan, I think you're going to like this here around the Doghouse, presented by Surf Pro.
A chance to speak to Georgia coach Kirby Smart here right now. He's on hand, ready to go. We're going to talk to him. We know that his time is limited. We certainly appreciate that. Coach, thank you so much for stopping by and being part of this with us. Yeah, got a little bowling shirt. The DawgNation bowling shirt looks pretty good, right? You got to try to dress the part, and you got to try to look the part when you're here.
You look good.
Well,
you look like you can bowl.
I may look like I can bowl, but I promise you I cannot. But nonetheless, we're happy to be here, and we had a chance to talk to your wife earlier, and she talked about the fun of supporting a great cause like this. What does it mean to you, both Coach Richt, but also the chance to come out here and use this platform that Georgia football provides you to raise the money that you're raising?
Well, when Coach Richt reached out and asked, I was all in. He had the perfect week picked. We had the off week. He said, can we get the players there? I said, absolutely. It's for a great cause. We've got a player dealing with Crohn's in Kelton. And for Coach Richt, I lost a grandfather to Parkinson's. When he reached out, we were all in. Our players, they love bowling anyway.
Obviously, Coach Richt hired you back in 2005, sent you great well wishes before the 2021 National Championship. What does he mean to you personally?
Just has taught me a lot about balancing coaching and your family. He and Catherine, even when I was at Alabama, every year they would send me a card once a week to say, hey, we're thinking about your family. We're praying for you guys. And, he just did it the right way. And I have a lot of appreciation. A lot of our guys on our staff work for him. So there's a great appreciation for what he meant to Athens and the University of Georgia by everybody.
And one of the things you talk about a lot is the great connection your players have with each other. Tonight we get a chance to see that with our own eyes. They're smiling. They're having a good time. It's obviously their bye week, so they could be doing something else with their time tonight if they wanted to be. What does it mean for you that they would also give of their time in service of a great cause like this?
That's the kind of kids we got. They were dying to go. I was like, man, I don't know. After practice, they got another practice tomorrow. It's their week off. I said, man, we might struggle to get 30 guys. We had 64 guys sign up. They all wanted to do it. They all wanted to give back their time and effort. So it's a great cause. I'm glad they did it.
I'm going to finish with this. On Saturday, a couple of your staff
played in high school in the state of Georgia. But I tell you, that list is full of dogs. I saw DJ Shockley. He's going in. There's a ton of dogs that are going in this time.
Well, Coach, we appreciate you stopping by and being with us here for a minute. Best of luck tonight. Have a great time, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Go Dogs.
A little bit of a glitch there. We lost a little bit of that, but a good chance to hear from Georgia coach Kirby Smart and celebrating a wonderful night there. And as Coach Smart talks about, so much, just so many good things going on with Mark Richt and the Dog Bowl last night. If you got a chance to tune in and see it, you know how great that is. And I want to encourage you. The whole purpose of putting this on video, getting a chance to see that, getting a chance to enjoy that, the whole purpose of all of this is to raise money for a wonderful cause. Obviously, research for Parkinson's disease, research for Crohn's disease, a lot of this being done through the Isaacson Center there at UGA. So the website I want you to go to is ricksdogbowl.com. If you are hearing about this and you want to participate in what Kirby believes in support of Mark Richt, what Mark Richt and his family believes in, because Coach Richt is battling Parkinson's, one of his daughters, granddaughters, I should say, is dealing with Crohn's disease. The website here, ricksdogbowl.com. You can go there, you can find the link, and you can continue to participate in this and really be a part of a great story as DawgNation comes together to raise huge money for a wonderful, wonderful cause. please make sure you continue to do that. Give if you can. ricksdogbowl.com. And Kirby Smart's appearance, of course, a part of Around the Doghouse here, presented today by ServPro. And before we talk to Terrence Edwards, let me remind you that ServPro, a great name to know when you're talking about a couple of challenging issues you may find for your home or your rental property or your commercial property, perhaps where you house your business. Sometimes these properties get damaged through fire, water intrusion, all kinds of ways in which messes can happen. And these messes have the potential of impacting your livelihood, whether it's the passive income you get from a rental property or the commercial property where your business is housed and located, or it's your own home where your quality of life is injured after something like that. When you faced something along those lines, some sort of heavy damage caused by fire, water intrusion, whatever else, you want that cleanup to take place, and you want that to all be put back together like it never even happened. And that is what ServPro is all about. So I want you to check out their website. It's servpro.com. That's SERV, servpro.com. Each and every ServPro franchise is independently owned and operated. And so you're talking about people who have a vested income in the outcome, just like you do, if you're going through any kind of cleanup situation. Their restoration specialists want to put that all back together for you. Fire damage, water intrusion, whatever you're dealing with, our friends at ServPro can do great work for you. So please find them online at servpro.com. All right, so before we're done on today's show, there is, I think, an interesting opinion that seems to be forming around UGA and a possible playoff matchup that might exist for the Dogs if Georgia is back in the college football playoff again here this year. We'll kind of talk about what that means and what we might learn about that here this weekend. And, of course, a whole lot more there as well. But for now, everything about Georgia, moving into the bye week, getting ready to live life without Brock Bowers for a little while, and a special honor for our next guest there as well. We want to make sure we highlight in a good way here, too. Let's cover all of that ground right now as we talk to Terrence Edwards here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Boy, so great to have Terrence Edwards here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And Terrence, obviously, for Georgia, the work never stops. We were just talking about, the fact that even during a bye week, Georgia's getting a big commitment, but also kind of moving into the preparations for Florida here. You're a player, you have been, you're a coach now. You know the sport at all levels, high school, college, and professional. How is the best way for Georgia to use this bye week, player rest-wise, preparation-wise? How do you get the most out of these 7 days knowing you don't have a football game this particular Saturday?
I think the best thing you do that you self-evaluate. I think this week is more about the Georgia Bulldogs and not about any of opponent or Florida coming up. You go and look at, get your data and see your tendencies, what you do well, what haven't you done so well. And you just try to go out and correct those mistakes that other teams may find in their preparation to play Georgia. So you just go out there, for one, try to just work on yourself get better. And also, it's time to heal a little bit. I know we have a lot of injuries right now, so the bye week couldn't come at a better time with the injuries that we have.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I want to talk to you about one of those significant injuries, obviously, coming up here in a moment. But we also heard David Pollack, say a moment ago that, you look at some of these future Georgia games, Ole Miss, David says that could be a problem. Missouri, right now, that's a good football team. And obviously, for most of this year, Luther Burden's been terrific for the Tigers there as well. Like, how much can some of that self-scouting you were just discussing and some of that work on yourself, that preparation right now, how much can that prepare Georgia, not just for the Florida game that's coming up next Saturday, a rivalry game that matters a lot to a lot of us, but also what looks to be on paper right now, a pretty challenging stretch and perhaps more difficult than it initially appeared to be when the season was first kind of being discussed and, so soft, so weak, whatever else. Well, when you're playing, ranked Missouri, ranked Ole Miss, ranked Tennessee in 3 consecutive weeks, I don't know that schedule all of a sudden, quite seems soft anymore. That to me doesn't quite seem like that matches that necessarily anymore. So how much can this week sort of prepare Georgia for beyond the Florida game, but also the upcoming stretch of very difficult games after that?
Yes, it can help with rest. I think mentally and physically, the players need rest. They've been going at it for months and months. They just really haven't had a break to just kind of decompress and just and just take a deep breath and relax a little bit. And this week is about a little bit about relaxing, getting your mind right, because there is a stretch right now that we need to be physically and mentally prepared for these teams that we got coming up. And like I said earlier, this is probably the best time to have a break with the stretch of games that we do have to get some players back and figure out some things moving forward.
It's Terrence Edwards here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. And, of course, by now we have talked plenty about the Brock Bowers injury and, what has gone on there and how Georgia moves on without that. Terrence, this wide receiver room for Georgia very well right now. What do you think will be the Georgia response here to playing without Bowers? He's clearly a very important player for UGA, but he's also not the only talented player on this offense. How do you think Georgia's poised to respond, knowing it's going to play at least for the next few weeks, it would appear, without a guy in Brock Bowers, who I think has been the best player in college football this year? How does Georgia do this?
Yes, I just think personally some of the other offensive weapons, personally, because, the narrative right now is Georgia's season is done without Brock. And so they should take that personal, like, hold up now, we have some talented guys in this room. And I tweeted this, I retweeted this from the DawgNation, like, what do we do without Brock? Like, you're going to move, different players into that position that was designed for Brock. I think Oscar Delp is very, very similar to him skill set-wise. The only thing Brock has different than Oscar is that yards after catch ability. Like, once he catches, then his running ability is just nobody has that ability in that tight end room that he has. But just going out there, getting open, catching the football, Oscar Depp will be able to do that. But now, Marcus and Rara and Dom can be put in the position that Brock would be in. Now you got receivers running those routes instead of a generational tight end. I don't think the drop off is that much once we put those receiver guys in who's used to running this space, who's used to being able to make people miss it. I think Dom can have a really breakout season if he's put in that position, because he's probably our next best run after catch player.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And, we saw Lovett last week have 9 catches, I think his most productive game thus far in a Georgia uniform. And, perhaps that comes at a good time in absence of Bowers. And I guess, Terrence, I've also been under the assumption that Lovett's now perhaps going to be on the field even more, right? I mean, it's like, Oscar kind of plays that traditional tight end look for you. A lot of what Brock has done is very untraditional from a tight end, lining up wide, slot receiver, the true hybrid type look. I mean, some of the Bauer snaps probably, that have to be divvied up now, some of that probably just means more time on the field for Lovett. Is it as simple as saying that?
I think so. I think, we're one of the few teams that really will run 12 personnel. That's 2 receivers, 2 tight ends more than anyone. Now I think it's probably going to go back to 11 personnel with 3 receivers and 1 tight end, with Oscar being that traditional tight end. But I'm not going to take anything away from Oscar and his ability to split out wide and do some of the things that Brock has done. And it's about scheme, and you're scheming guys open and putting guys in position to get open. I think Oscar is just more than capable of those things. But like I said, the difference is once you line them up, Oscar is going to catch and probably get 5 yards or 6 yards, where Brock would turn it to 20 to 30 yards. But we're still moving the chains. It's probably going to look different, but I think we will be in more 11 personnel than 12 personnel.
What about, Ladd McConkey's back, which seems to be something that's a little bit of a lingering concern, not able to be a full go against Vanderbilt, and Kirby Smart has said has also really not been a full go in practice either, which perhaps means more to me. You could see Georgia wanting to be careful with him during the game, but obviously if he can practice, clearly Georgia wants him out there and participating as a full go in practice, and Kirby Smart has said that that's not something that McConkey has really been able to do. I don't know what kind of experience you personally have with back injuries, Terrence, but do you have any kind of insight into maybe how healthy he could be? And when you think about some of these dynamic plays that Brock obviously is capable of making, how much of that can be replicated if McConkey is getting healthier at a time in which Bowers is out?
Yes, he's another one that we need to get healthy. I never had really a back injury besides tightness. And when your back is tight, you can't move. Your back kind of controls a lot of your bodily movements. So he haven't been able to be the Ladd McConkey that we know. But 20 plays a game from Ladd, we're getting production from him. So if we can move those up to 40 plays, it will take some of the sting off. Not being there. Just my thing now, the offense players, who is the defense now going to key on? Because going into a game plan, every defense coordinator knows we got to stop Brock Bowers. And now is, who do we stop? That's going to be the question. Who we're going to put our attention to? Is it the running game? Is it the passing game? Is it specific players? So they're going to have to figure that out. And I think that's an advantage Georgia, because now you know that they're not going to just specifically scheme a defense to stop one player. It's kind of stop a passing game. Now we can run the football. We want to stop the passing game. Now, the running game, now we can pass the football. So I think the talent that we do have is not going to be a drop-off. We're just not going to have that generation of talent, but we do have enough talent on the offensive side that I don't think production would drop off.
And then the other thing you kind of see happening right now is that very quietly, Terrence Edwards seems to be emerging as a very capable running back for Georgia. I mean, there's a chance that he could finish with more rushing yards than anybody from the last two national championship teams have had, and perhaps anybody since DeAndre Swift finished his Georgia career in 2019. That's at least a possibility for Dejon here right now. I think this is a guy who has a look of a very capable SEC running back. How much does the extra component that Dejon is currently providing, how much does that give this Georgia offense a boost?
I think it gives it a boost when you can have a running back that can go for $140, $145, whatever he went for. But he's just a steady, hard-nosed South Georgia football player. Come from Colquitt County, and we understand what that football community brings, and he exemplifies what South Georgia football is. He's not the biggest, he's not the fastest, but he's dependable, and as they come, he catches the football well. So we're going to need Kendall Milton as well. He was starting to pick up some steam, and yet again, he comes up lame. So I think the combination of those two, if we could get Kendall back, the running game has been producing more and more. The offensive line has played better of late. So we need all key components next 3 to 4 weeks, because the schedule dictates that we need all our players healthy, knowing that Brock is not going to be there. Offensive line has to step their game up. The running backs have to step their game up. The coaches have to step their game up. So everyone has to step their game up a notch to fill that void. So
last week I shortchanged you, Terrence, and this was on my error here, because I was trying to do like 15 things at once, to be completely honest with you. Did not give you full credit for going into the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame coming up. Now, I want to bring that up here right now for the simple reason that, how many Hall of Fames does this put you in? I know last year you went to the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame. Now you're going to the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame coming up, I guess next week. You going to be collecting? Are you in the Canadian Football Hall? How many Halls of Fame are you going to be in before it's all said and done here, Terrence?
I am in 3 so far. I am not in the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. Hopefully that one is next.
Sure.
But I am in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers Hall of Fame.
Are you really?
Yes, I am in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers Hall of Fame. I am in the high school Georgia Hall of Fame first class, and I am now in the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame. And hopefully next SEC Legends. I know No Sean got that.
Yeah.
So hopefully that one is soon.
Have you not been Have you not been an SEC Legend yet? Do we lose Terrence?
That I don't understand, but I have not. For someone who led the SEC, was the all-time leading receiver in SEC history for 15 years to Georgia, I don't understand that. And been Georgia's all-time leading receiver now for 21 years, I don't understand it. But hopefully one day that will come.
And that's a fun one. And that's a fun one too, because that's one from every. For people who don't know, the SEC Legends is like one from every team. They get announced at the SEC championship game each and every year, and it's a nice ovation. Or depending on who's playing the game, it could be a nice resounding set of boos, which I think the players kind of enjoy that part anyway too. Just because just kind of a fun, kind of a fun rivalry type thing back and forth. So we got to get you. You're right. The next thing to happen, it's got to be SEC Legends.
Yes, that's the one that I'm looking forward to because of that. And also, I want to get in all these Hall of Fames because my brother is in the Georgia Hall of Fame, and I don't like him being in something that I'm not.
Sure.
I don't like him being one up on me. That's that brother competition, that competitive that we've had. So now we're both in the Georgia Hall of Fame. He's a SEC legend, which I'm not yet, so hopefully that's soon. And another one that I would like to get in is the State of Georgia Hall of Fame, the one in Macon. Just what I did in high school, what I did in college, what I did in the professional race. I think I've represented the state of Georgia very well.
I like that. We got to make sure that happens, Terrence. That's really good stuff. Well, if there also is a Hall of Fame for being a great wide receiver trainer, personal coach for guys who want to catch the football better, we believe you could be in the Hall of Fame for that there as well. For people who want to find the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy online, how can they do that?
You can find me on all social media at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, hope you enjoy your Saturday with no Georgia football and enjoy some time off. And we will look forward to talking to you back here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp again very soon.
We'll be at the second annual Georgia High School Hall of Fame this weekend.
Good. Are you going to wear your blue jacket to the event?
I am going to wear my blue jacket.
I love it. Well, I'll see you there. There's like 20-something former Georgia players going in here this year, so that's an incredible collection there too.
Yes, and I have to go see my guy DJ and Marcus get inducted.
I can't wait for that. That's going to be good stuff. Terrence, we'll see you there Saturday at the College Football Hall of Fame for that, and congratulations, obviously, a year later on being a part of the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame and also going to the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame here this year. Good stuff, Terrence. We'll see you on Saturday night.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so what Terrence is referencing is the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame, which was also what I was talking to Kirby Smart about last night. A little bit of a brief glitch and all of that. But so you've got 20-something. I think the overall number is 22 maybe. You've got 20-something former Georgia players going into the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame this year, and two of them are Georgia staffers. Offensive coordinator Mike Bobo, Jarvis Jones, obviously one of the quality control analyst there, but as Terrence said, it's John Stinchcomb going in, it's DJ Shockley going in this year, Mark Stroud is going in this year there as well, and a whole long list. I'm not going to be able to rattle them all off by memory, but like 20-something former Dogs going in there on that. So for someone, once again, who loves this stuff, to be a chance to be a part of that, I'm a part of the board. I'm on the board of the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame, which is, to be frank, probably as close to a Hall of Fame as I'll ever get. I don't believe they have Halls of Fame for like loudmouth podcast streaming video hosts. Maybe one of these days they will. As of now, that's not really a Hall of Fame worthy endeavor, but if it ever is, maybe we'll have a shot at that. But for now, we're just happy to be on the board of the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame and helping make sure the football careers of some of the great Georgians get honored, whether they went to UGA or not. And so Saturday night, we'll have our second class going in. Eventually, we'll get a chance to watch this on TV on the Peachtree Sports Network. But a wonderful time to be doing that there on Saturday night. That's going to be a really terrific time. Now, what else will be a terrific time is cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Of course, thinking about that DawgNation cruise coming up in April of 2024, wanting you to be on board with us. This is our third iteration of the DawgNation cruise, third straight year we've done that. And every year there's a challenge to make it bigger and better. And boy, have we answered the call on that here this year. As for the very first time ever, the DawgNation cruise sets sail on an Oasis-class ship, Allure of the Seas, one of the largest ships at sea. That means more specialty restaurants, more cool experiences on board the ship, just more fun to be had. And in honor of the cruise being bigger and better than it's ever been, that also means more specially themed DawgNation events there as well. So we want you to be on board. Jessica Slater, a wonderful travel agent, has put a terrific website together for you to find out more information about this. It's royaldogs.com. Royaldogs.com. You can find out more about the DawgNation cruise coming up April of 2024 on board Allure of the Seas, leaving out of Port Canaveral, Florida, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day Coco Cay. We will see you for all of that. Now, let's go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean here for a moment. And I've got a lot of the upcoming weekend's worth of games on my mind, and I'm curious about this Florida State-Duke game on Saturday night. Now, from a just sort of prediction standpoint, how you expect the game to play out standpoint, the big question in the game is, does Riley Leonard return for Duke? And it seems like, at least from a full health standpoint, probably won't. But that sets up a really interesting game for Florida State at home against a Duke team that's been really good this year with Mike Elko as head coach, and obviously even through the Riley Leonard injury. But the Florida State part of this I find to be pretty fascinating, because if you look at some of those like playoff prediction things, the national website's right. And I know some of y'all are mad at Heather Dinich right now. We may do the Dinich stuff tomorrow. To be honest with you, Heather to me is kind of in the category of like what a Dan Wolken at one point in time would have been, or like honestly, I actually kind of like Danny Cannell. I don't necessarily even put Cannell in this category, but I don't take Heather seriously. I think that Heather is fundamentally an unserious person. And the same way that, like, for those of you who even know who Dan Wolken would have been, it's like it's easy to sort of take cheap points by, hey, here's this crazy thing this person said. I try not to do that with Heather just because I don't find it to be all that serious. But some of y'all are upset with something that she said about Georgia. We may have some fun with that on tomorrow's show for a brief moment. But the point now, though, is different than that. The point now is the overall playoff projections that are out there. A lot of people are kind of riding that story. Here's the latest playoff projections. And the common playoff projection you see right now, obviously Georgia in the playoff. And it seems like a lot of these websites sort of have Georgia playing Florida State in the Sugar Bowl. That's one of the two national semifinal games this year. The other playoff game is the Rose Bowl. I think there's a little bit of a desire in the hearts and minds of some college football fans, media types. If you could get a traditional Rose Bowl for a playoff game, I think there's a real big desire to do that. Michigan, Washington, the possibility that could be a playoff game in the Rose Bowl. Classic Big Ten champ against classic Pac-12 champ. That's, of course, assuming that Michigan wins the Big Ten. Right now, I believe they probably will. But there's obviously a lot of work to be done to kind of decide that. But the projections right now have it sort of like Big Ten champ Michigan, Pac-12 champ Washington. You put them in the Rose Bowl. So if Georgia makes the playoff as the number one team, who are they likely to play? Well, we think it's going to be Florida State. It seems like a lot of these websites sort of have that right now. And if you're looking for something else to watch here this weekend, I would watch this game, Duke, Florida State, from that vantage point of, does Florida State have the look of a college football playoff level team here right now? And for me, I think that at least thus far, they have sort of stopped short of being that. I think they're very, 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 very good, but I think that playoff is typically a little bit better than that, and I don't know that they quite bump up against that level for me yet. There's still time to change that. They've got Duke, ranked opponent this weekend, still game looming against Miami. I guess you're thinking about the possibility of what, like, say, UNC in the ACC championship game, I think, maybe. So there's still the potential for big games here left to be had. But as of now, the only real elite thing that I think that Florida State has is probably the tandem of wide receivers. Now, Johnny Wilson's been a little bit banged up. I believe he's coming back. Keon Coleman, the transfer of Michigan State, it's been terrific this year when I've watched Florida State play. So that's the one thing they do really have, I believe, at the elite level. They've got terrific wide receivers, I believe. And obviously a terrific tandem of wide receivers could be a problem, potentially for Georgia if that matchup were to happen. But I'm kind of more thinking about this along the lines of, if we're going to say right now that Washington is one of the clubhouse leaders for a playoff berth because they just got a big win against Oregon and they're playing a really good brand of football, the Big Ten champ almost certainly going to be there. I would favor Michigan to do that. That was one of my preseason picks. If we say that Georgia is trending towards being in the playoff because it's still the number one team in the country, and you're saying, well, who is that fourth playoff team right now? I don't know that I would put – in fact, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't. I would not put Florida State ahead of the eventual Big 12 winner. I think that Texas, who was my preseason pick, Oklahoma, who I believe has to be in the conversation right now, I would take Big 12 winner over Florida State as sort of that fourth elite level team in the college football playoff. If Georgia got to play Florida State in a national semifinal game, I'm not telling you it's going to be easy, but is it on paper easier than Ohio State would have been for Georgia a year ago, or Michigan would have been the year before that? I believe so. Easier than Oklahoma would have been in 2017? I also believe so there as well, that you've got to play somebody in a national semifinal game. And maybe these are famous last words. Maybe I'll be made to eat my words when it's all said and done. Well, I think that Florida State's pretty good, and will have a chance to win the ACC, and if you win that league, you have a chance to win the playoff. I don't put Florida State right now in the same category as the other playoff teams we're mentioning, and I assume eventually the Big 12 winner, whether it be Texas or Oklahoma, I assume that team will eventually probably have a stronger case for the playoff than Florida State does. But watching them this weekend against Duke will give you a chance to make that, opinion seem incorrect. We'll see if it does. The other big game on Saturday that we're also watching here pretty closely is what's going to go down with Alabama and Tennessee. Let me give you one semi-hottish take on this here for a moment. That if you told me right now I had one game to win and I could pick either quarterback of either of these two teams to win the game, I'm not telling you I would feel great about either guy, but can we agree that Jalen Milroe is a better quarterback than Joe Milton is? I mean, can we agree with that? That Milroe may not be great, but if you had to pick, Sandlot football or, expansion draft, SEC, you had to choose Milton or Milroe to be your quarterback. I mean, Milroe's the guy you want right now, right? That in this game on Saturday where Alabama plays at home as the favorite, they've also got the quarterback advantage, right? I think you have to say that. Now, what's weird, even if what I just said is true, and even if you do acknowledge here that the quarterback edge favors Alabama in this game, y'all, I think pretty quietly Tennessee's been the better of these two teams this year. Even though Milton's been a little bit of a flop as the starting quarterback, this offense does not really right now look like a Josh Heupel style offense. In fact, last Saturday in beating Texas A&M, they ran the ball a lot. I think right now, even with the Tennessee offense not quite being certainly what it was a year ago, what we typically come to expect from a Josh Heupel unit, the truth is Tennessee's kind of been the better football team between these two here this season, I believe, and that's with the Florida loss notwithstanding. So, interesting game there on Saturday, third Saturday in October. A lot of Georgia fans are getting ready to settle in and enjoy this. And as we've been saying, the stakes from a Georgia perspective are pretty high here. It's either a Tennessee win, and that game on the road in November feels huge, or it's an Alabama win, and you feel like you've got one of these classic SEC championships where you've got two respected teams on each side of the field with a lot of stakes there in the game. Mike Griffith was on our show earlier this week saying if you're a Georgia fan, you root for Bama to kind of make the SEC East easier to win. I'd like to think Georgia's the kind of team that all it has to worry about is taking care of its own business, but maybe being a little bit, at least with a mindset towards, what you need to have happen to clinch that spot in the SEC championship and then clinching that spot in the college football playoff. Maybe that is at least worth considering. I was going to do a thing on the All-American stuff, but I've actually kind of gone along on this right now. So let me just save that story. Perhaps we'll come back to that tomorrow. A little bit of a look at two interesting games there on Saturday. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And while I have a moment here, let me also shout out our friends at Mr. Electric. Mr. Electric is DawgNation's choice for residential and commercial electrical needs. They've been in business nearly 30 years. They offer repair work, installations, lighting work, and, of course, electrical safety, which is very, very important. It's not the kind of thing you want to be doing yourself. Making sure that expertly trained electricians are out there taking care of you on all of that. They've also got a ton of licensed experts, insured electricians, and upfront flat pricing, which gives you a little bit of peace of mind about what you're going to be paying for the work that you're having done. So if it's a 24-hour, kind of emergency type situation, or you just need a quote about some work you've been looking to get done, our friends at Mr. Electric got you covered on all of that. So the website is MrElectricAtlanta.com. That's MrElectricAtlanta.com. I'm always amazed at how talented some members of our audience are, especially given my talent limitations. I'm always amazed by how talented some of our folks are. Our buddy Ryan Walker is an example of this. Tremendous graphic artist. I love this. I'm going to give you the caption, and I'm going to describe the picture for those of you not seeing this. This is our golden shoe for today. Ryan saying, get well soon to Brock Bowers saying, we need the Napa Valley Express for that title run. And then you see the picture here. You got the Georgia-themed freight train. Brock Bowers running there, giving the stiff arm to an Ohio State player. Great collection of highlights from Bowers. Ryan's a tremendously talented graphic artist, so we'll give him a golden shoe for that today. That is a wonderful thing to be able to see. How about something else that's really wonderful? We are now single-digit days to the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. 9 days from now, the lousy, stinking Gators have quite a reckoning coming to them. That is our Gatorator Countdown. We'll see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up and do the work for you on time for the price that's promised. They'll take good care of you. Great, great friends of ours. And, of course, a big part of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, coming up tomorrow. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to take some comments, and y'all, we've got a 2 more shows to record today, just to be completely honest with you. So I got to pop out of here in a minute to kind of make way for those who need to do that, including me, I guess, on both of those coming up. So we'll take some comments, and then tomorrow for a Friday, we'll try to do kind of a normalish, comment section to kind of roll into an off weekend for the dog. So there you go. All right, there's Ryan Walker in our Facebook comment section. Ryan, terrific stuff, really, really good. Anthony White giving him the shout out. By the way, we saw Anthony a little earlier this week on our Golden Shoe for his trip up there to Nashville for the Georgia Vanderbilt game. Eric DeVornsey says the worst case scenario would be a 2-loss team from the West beating an undefeated Georgia in the SEC championship. Committee's head would explode on who gets in. Yeah, maybe it might. But this committee, now it's a different committee year to year, but the committee's not afraid to leave out a conference champ in favor of a team that had the better overall resume. Or if you would even say it's a better resume, we've seen that in the Big Ten before, right? Was it 2016? Is this right? 16 that Penn State won the league, but Ohio State made the playoff. Isn't that what happened? So we've kind of seen them do that. They had no problem taking Georgia on the heels of losing to Alabama in 2021. This year may be a slightly different discussion because here's what you got to acknowledge. That right now you've got 3 teams in the Big Ten that were in the top 4 of something like the analytical metrics and things like that. Now we got a big showdown between Ohio State and Penn State on Saturday. But the odds of the Big Ten having kind of 2 playoff-worthy teams by perception, the odds of that are pretty good. In this round robin between Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan, whoever ends up being the non-division winner, because remember, the Big Ten is also still one more year of divisions. So the Big Ten East, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, will face the winner of the Big Ten West, which could be like an 11-1 Iowa team, believe it or not, or something like that. Who's ever like second place in that round robin between Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, from a perception standpoint, still going to probably look pretty good. The other thing I think that no one's considered yet, because there's honestly a lot of football left, but what if this scenario plays out in the Big 12? What if you've got a scenario where, when it's all said and done, you've got 2 12-1 teams? 12-1 Oklahoma, which beat Texas on a neutral, and 12-1 Texas, which beat Oklahoma on a neutral. How do you decide between that? And some people are going to say, well, Texas is the Big 12 champ. They ought to get the nod. But that is a difference without a distinction in my mind, because just because you call this the Big 12 championship game and you call that something else, both games will be played in the Dallas area. I don't know that Texas's win in the Big 12 championship should matter more than Oklahoma's win just because it came later on the schedule. I don't know that should necessarily be the case. If anything, we see examples of this in rematches. Oftentimes, the team that lost game 1 wins game 2. Does that mean they were the better team, or does that mean it was just their turn to win? So not only do you potentially could foresee a scenario where you have multiple Big Ten teams perhaps competing for the college football playoff, I think you could foresee a scenario where you perhaps have multiple Big 12 teams. As weird as it is, the year before Texas and Oklahoma joined the SEC, I think it's possible you could foresee a scenario where both of those teams could perhaps be a part of a college football playoff discussion too. So I think the point that our commenter is getting to is if you're Georgia, and can we throw the R.S. Andrews thing up there for this? If you're Georgia, you got to be really, really careful. You got to be really careful that you don't get tripped up, because in a year like this, even if it shouldn't be true, Georgia getting tripped up in the SEC championship game or at some point in time in the regular season at least opened the door for other teams to be considered for the playoff instead of Georgia, depending on how those circumstances play out. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I think that's dumb. And there is a certain kind of like talking head opinion that you see in a lot of different walks of life that's almost always motivated by lack of skin in the game. In other words, it's easy if you don't have any stakes to say, whatever team's proven they're better than Georgia when Georgia's won the last 2 national championships. But if Georgia played that team, would this talking head on TV be willing to put a stack of dollar bills down on that other team, beating Georgia or keeping it closer than the experts thought, because Georgia would almost certainly be a point spread favorite in almost any of these instances? Of course, the answer to that question is no. There's a lot of, easy fodder for like the sort of talking head commentariat about, what Georgia needs to do kind of within the fishbowl of just this year. But human nature, of course, is also going to consider the fact that Georgia has won the last 2 national championships. And you have to twist yourself into a pretzel to pretend that doesn't matter in this year there either. That Georgia deserves a right to lose its title on the field. If you're going to take the national championship from them, you would have to pin their shoulders to the mat 1, 2, 3 in order to do it. They deserve that right. And I think anyone who's sort of rightly thinking understands that, whether you be a Georgia fan or not. But a lot of these talking heads on TV or, people who are trying to, sort of churn up interest on the internet, they will do anything to avoid the obvious logic that stares them in the face. Scotty Barnes says that the simple solution to all this is we just win out. And, Scotty, I would agree with you on that. William Camacho says, I want the Vol, he calls them the Vol LOLOLs, which is very funny, to beat the Gums so they can be out of the playoff conversation. So, yeah, I mean, the rooting interest for Tennessee, Alabama, now for the most part, my rooting interest is just a good football game, right? But the rooting interest in terms of who benefits and what do you want to see or who do you dislike the most, that's a pretty interesting conversation among Georgia fans. So if y'all want to weigh in on that, we'll let you do that too. Let's see what else. Ken Holcomb getting ready to have his surgical procedure. He's been kind enough to keep us up to date on what he's going through. Kent, we really wish you the best, and we're praying for you sincerely. You have been a courageous fighter here, and we want you to keep that going, and we can't wait to be talking to you very soon here. Please keep us updated on how you're doing, Kent. We would really appreciate that. Let me go to YouTube here for a moment. Let's see what else. Alan Verbanchik says, hard to beat Bam at home. Yeah, so we've seen Bama lost to LSU in 2019. Didn't lose to anybody in 2020. Lost in College Station in 2021. Did they lose a home game last year? Lost at LSU. Almost lost Texas A&M last year, but didn't. And then lost at Tennessee. Yeah, Bama home game, pretty tough. Pretty tough. Bama at home, pretty tough. Army Dog Charlie says there is potential as of now for 5 undefeated conference champs. SEC, ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, Pac-12. Who would you leave out if that happens? As I said before, I'd leave out Florida State. I think Florida State's sneakily not dominant. I really do. So if I was like the dictator of college football, it was my way or the highway, I could fairly easily eliminate Florida State from that discussion. In fact, I believe that Florida State probably eliminates itself from the discussion at some point in time. I don't believe they'll go undefeated. But it is interesting how many people are projecting them against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Rematch the 2002 game, of course. It'd be a fun matchup, but yeah. Spencer Clark says the best running backs we faced this year has been running quarterbacks, unfortunately. There is some truth to that. Army Dog mentioned that the one thing that Florida State did do was, as he says, skull drag LSU. Yeah, very impressive there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a bad team, and I'm not saying it couldn't be a formidable matchup, but I don't put them in the category of what I sort of view a Michigan to be or a Texas to be, last year's Ohio State. And by the way, I don't put this year's Ohio State in that category either. I think I've got a group right now that includes a Washington, a Georgia, a Michigan as I think the clear 3 best teams. And the truth is that Georgia and Michigan are probably in a group above Washington to me, but let's just keep it simple and say Georgia, Washington, Michigan, I think they're the 3 best teams in the country here right now. To me, that next group I'm not quite so sure yet. That's an Ohio State for me. This Ohio State team offensively is not what it once was. It's just not. I don't think Kyle McCord's that guy. The overall numbers don't look terrible, but you watch McCord, it's just, this is not C.J. Stroud playing quarterback for Ohio State right now. I really don't know what to make of Penn State. They haven't played anybody. Now you can say, well, then there's Georgia. But we're talking about Penn State right now. Penn State hasn't played anybody. I really don't know what to expect from them. Could they beat Ohio State on Saturday? I guess they probably could. I really don't know what to expect from Penn State. But you'll put them in that next group probably too. I think Florida State for me is in that next group, but they're not in the first group. They're in the second group. My suspicion is that Texas is better than Florida State, and as I said before, I'll take Oklahoma as better than Florida State there as well. But a lot of this will shake itself out here at some point in time. Alan Verboncic says Duke might beat Florida State. To me, all of that comes down to Riley Leonard. And I think the safest assumption is that Leonard either won't play at all or won't play, won't play very much. And when you think about a game on the road against a team like Florida State, perhaps Duke, who I think stays alive in the race for the ACC championship, even if it loses, they may take a business decision here and decide that Leonard is better off coming back for another game anyway. You got to at least consider that as a possibility, that sometimes for the game that you think it's a long shot to win anyway, that you're better off having 100% healthy Riley Leonard for what comes next. End of season game against UNC, for instance. You may be better off with that. Nature Gator says that Florida State's got a great quarterback. Jordan Travis' numbers are not great. I mean, I think that Travis is really good, but this is an example of what I'm talking about. Jordan Travis's numbers are not great. In fact, let me see if I can pull this up for a second. So if we look at, let's look at yards per attempt. Jordan Travis, let me find this for a second. Sorry for the silence. Yeah, he's 39th. He's 39th in yards per attempt. Believe it or not, he's behind Graham Mertz. Cam Ward, he's behind Grayson McCall, who's got no help at Coastal Carolina this year. He's behind TJ Finley at Texas State. DJ Uiagalelei. I mean, you can make a case that Uiagalelei for Oregon State's having a better year than Jordan Travis is for Florida State. I think that Travis is a good player. But at one point in time, you were talking about Travis for the Heisman or something like that. I think Florida State has terrific wide receivers. But right now, Jordan Travis is not in the Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy. I mean, Carson Beck's having a better year than Jordan Travis is. Like right now, Travis is not in that category. I didn't mean to turn this like an anti-Florida State show. I'm not trying to bash Florida State because really I don't even feel that strongly about it. But in response to the point here, Travis is like Florida State. This is a good quarterback on a really good team, but for me, probably below that championship level. 478 Dog says Travis also has way better receivers. Yeah, I mean, if you're saying Georgia, Florida State, Sugar Bowl tomorrow, you better believe we'll spend weeks talking about those Florida State receivers because I know Wilson had some drops against LSU. I think he's really good. I think that Keon Coleman, I mean, who is ACC Player of the Year? Could Keon Coleman be ACC Player of the Year? I guess I don't know enough about the league to say for sure. I mean, couldn't you make a case that Keon Coleman's the best player in the ACC? Am I wrong about that? One of y'all will tell me if I'm wrong about that. Curtis Williams is right. He says the Florida State offense sort of predicated on throwing up those 50-50 balls to wideouts. I don't disagree with that. I really don't. I don't disagree with that. Spencer Clark says that Jordan Travis is dangerous out of the pocket, and that's his value. He does have that value. He does have that value for sure. Army Dog Charlie says that James Franklin is overrated. Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to find out a lot about this. I mean, there was the thing, Charlie, did you see this last week where, Franklin kind of got into it with the reporter, and the reporter probably had a poorly worded question. And if you give these coaches an out on the poorly worded question, they're just going to take it. And this was like one of those sparring matches where everybody online goes, James Franklin committed murder. Everybody likes to kind of sort of sell this, dress it up as, oh my gosh, this man's got a family or whatever else. So like James Franklin like really went hard after the guy who asked the question because the guy framed the question around the notion of, do you just need to sort of chuck it deep more? And James Franklin's like, no, we're not just going to chuck it deep, which is, kind of a sort of a sarcastic response to a poorly worded question. But the actual premise here, I think, makes some sense. That Drew Aller, they're not throwing it deep enough. And they are just sort of check down, check down, check down, check down. Now, schematically, what do you do to design some deeper throws? I don't know. I'm not a coach. But, I can certainly tell you when you're not doing it enough. And I would say in the case of Penn State, you're not doing it enough. And, pretty clearly, given the fact that even with Marvin Harrison Jr., and I know Emeka Boka has been injured, but I think he has been, right? So, you talk about, maybe some limitation. Travion Henderson's definitely been injured. But Ohio State's one of these teams they're much better defensively than they have been. They're more limited offensively than we're used to seeing them be. It's almost like they're a little bit like Tennessee. They sort of flip-flop their personality a little bit. If Penn State wants to beat Ohio State on Saturday, it's going to take a little bit more of an aggressive offensive mindset to be able to do it. And based on what we've seen so far this year, maybe they can. Maybe they've been saving it all for this particular game. They certainly haven't played anybody yet. But I just don't know what to make of Penn State. I mean, there's a chance they're the team in the country that nobody's talking about because they're rankings-wise right up there with Ohio State and Michigan, and yet everybody sort of assumes it's Michigan's league and that Ohio State, who was in the playoff a year ago, is sort of the number one threat beyond that. But who knows how true that really is? I don't know. I do love these games, though. It's one of the things about I wish there were two of me, or I wish I had two weekends, because while nothing matters to me more than Georgia football does, I'd be more than happy just to watch all these games every weekend. And I just love it. I just do. I'd love to just sort of sink my teeth into Ohio State, Penn State on Saturday and Alabama, Tennessee. I just love that. I wish I could do that every weekend. Unfortunately, there's just never enough time to go around. And that's one of the hardest things about getting older is you realize, there are books you want to read, you'll never read them. There are like movies you want to see, you'll never see all of them. Football games you want to watch, you'll never watch them. I don't mean to be over philosophical here, but that's sort of part of the peace that you make as you get older. And I'm not, obviously old, at least I hope I'm not. But as you get older, you just sort of realize there will never be enough time to do everything I want to do. It'll never exist. There'll never be this moment where there's this huge reservoir of like unsanctioned time. And so you just try to do the best you can. Randy Hall, by the way, did y'all catch this at the beginning of the interview? So Kirby Smart really liked our DawgNation bowling shirts. He really enjoyed that, which I was very proud of those too. I feel like bowling shirts are kind of my style a little bit. When I'm not like I have like sort of two zones. I have like kind of preppy dressed up BA, that's sort of like on the job BA. There's also sort of off the clock BA where I'm perhaps going to be in like my tropical shirt, my cruise attire. And I sort of feel like the bowling shirt kind of veers in the direction of like the kind of tropical themed cruise attire. When you are of ample girth, shirts that are designed to be worn untucked typically sometimes can look a little better. So I'm kind of pro bowling shirt for the most part. I'm kind of pro bowling shirt. I was glad that Kirby liked that. Brooksy and DT having fun with the DawgNation invasion of the Tennessee River. Let's see what else. DT says, imagine going fresh into what he calls Kneeling Stadium, fresh off beating Bama and Tuscaloosa. Fans decorated the checkerboard, expecting to take down the two-time. Oh, it's a good point. So what DT's kind of saying here is that what if Tennessee wins, turning up the hype on that game, only to have Georgia ruin Tennessee's season right there in Knoxville? So that's, in other words, that's DT saying, hey, give me the big game so I can earn the big win and put another trophy on the wall. DT, I kind of like the way you think there on that. Roger Hall kind of also in the same idea. Roger says he doesn't hate Alabama. So historically speaking, my hatred for Alabama will never be what it is for the other teams, because when I was growing up, Georgia didn't play Alabama very much. And so therefore you don't have the long-time backstory against Alabama. That probably impacts the way that I think about a Tennessee, who, even though Georgia hasn't always played them, they've played them for almost my entire life. Auburn every year of my life, and obviously Florida's the lousy stinking Gators, of course. That's the number one rivalry. I think that what I hate about Alabama is the way that people talk about Alabama. Like, actually, I think that Nick Saban, I would say this once and burn the tape after I said this, there is something about the way that Saban approaches his life that I do think is somewhat inspiring. That, Saban is dedicated to excellence. Saban is very thoughtful about the way in which he approaches excellence. Like, I don't hate that. Who would hate that? I don't think you probably should. So there's an element in which that, I read, I don't want to say I've read books, but I've read a good bit about Saban and, kind of studied some of the stuff, talked to people that played for Nick Saban. I'm interested in that. The influence that Saban's had on Kirby, I'm interested in that too. So I don't personally hate Nick Saban, but I can't stand the way that people talk about Nick Saban. When I think about my hatred for Alabama, what really exists is this hatred that they are always given what I would perceive to be the ultimate benefit of the doubt all the time. Before the season began, we made a really big deal about some of the stuff that Kirk Herbstreit was saying about, just when you count Alabama out, that's when they're the most dangerous. And we weren't saying that because it was impossible for Alabama to win the national championship. Of course, it wasn't. We were saying that because that while Nick Saban is excellent, and I think that just rightly described as the best college football coach of all time, that does not make him superhuman. That does not make him a deity. And that Saban is just as vulnerable as any of us to maybe being imperfect. And it seems like he's never quite given credit for that. And, people don't like change. There's a natural aversion to change. And Kirby Smart represents change in college football. People don't dislike Kirby, but I think that people will always be resistant to change. What we're watching here is the natural evolution of change. Saban's getting older. He's moving out. Kirby Smart is still very young, moving into the prime of his coaching life, which ought to be scary for anybody who consider themselves to be a Georgia rival. And by perception, people just don't like embracing that change. A lot of college football writers and college football media types have been covering Nick Saban since they were young. And as long as Nick Saban's still on top, there's a certain part of their brain that means, well, maybe that means I'm still young because this has been true since I was young. And I think subliminally, that's where some of the, the continual praise of Saban kind of comes from. All right. Last couple of minutes here. Scott Harris says, I think the SEC is regretting canceling the Georgia-Oklahoma game. Could have helped with all those SEC out-of-conference losses at the beginning of the year, and it may give the heads reason to keep the SEC out of the college football playoff. I mean, here's what I honestly think. That we are right now doing some version of what we always do. And a lot of the media types are sort of fanning the flames on this. Perhaps I'm even doing that myself just to kind of get a fun conversation going. But if you want to make the absolute safest projection for the end of the season, it's not going to be wild chaos. It's going to be Georgia, Michigan, and then two other conference champions. Like, if you really want the safest projection, that's what it's going to be. Or if it's not that, it is still very possible it's Georgia, Alabama, and two Big Ten teams. Like, those to me are that if you said, give me like the pie chart of possible playoff groupings, to me, the largest slice of the pie, Georgia, Michigan, two other conference champs. Or let's say it this way, Georgia, Big Ten champ, and then two other conference champions, or two Big Ten, two SEC teams making the college football playoff. I still believe those are the two most likely outcomes. The least chaotic results are still, I believe, the most possible results, even though it seems like it could be crazy right now. In other words, while the Heather Diniches of the world will try to sell you on the idea that the SEC champion could be left out of the playoff if it's Georgia or whatever else, that is not happening. And deep down, she knows that. And that's why we don't think of her as a particularly serious person. That there's a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda. Oh, wouldn't it be interesting if this happened? Or, oh, hypothetical this, hypothetical that. But this is the 10th year of the college football playoff. We have a fairly well-established track record here. And as we move towards the end, thinking typically gets a lot more conventional, and we usually land at something that actually wouldn't have been all that difficult to predict when the season started. Astro UGA says, I think that Penn State has played. We're going to get ready to go. Astro UGA says, I think that Penn State's played at least as good a schedule as Michigan has. Penn State at least has a win over a ranked opponent, Iowa, who is now at 6-1. These games between Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan will settle the debate, though. Yeah, you may be right about that. I mean, to me, the case for Michigan is a little bit like the case for Georgia, which is it's not so much who Michigan has played, it's sort of how it's played. And while Michigan sort of, sleptwalked through a lot of, the early season, type stuff, they have been pretty dominant on a week-to-week basis. But I get the point that you're making, that ultimately what really matters is how these three teams do against each other. You're right about that. I don't disagree. I also, the same way that you kind of view Georgia with just human nature would say this year plus the last 2 years, I think you also have to do a version of that with Michigan too. It's this year plus the fact they've been in the playoff in each of the last 2 years. Haven't won a playoff game, of course, but they've won the Big Ten 2 years in a row. I think you have to do that a little bit too. All right, back on YouTube. These will be our final comments. Randy Payne, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Let's see. Anything else? Baggins and Friends wants to be like a la Savannah on St. Patrick's Day. He wants to go to the Tennessee River and dump a bunch of red food coloring in the river. I wonder how much food. Please don't do this because this may be against the law. How much food coloring would it take to turn the Tennessee River red? Once again, please do not do this. And if the FBI is listening right now, in no way am I suggesting that anyone should do this, because I'm assuming that's like contaminating a water source, something like that. Although food coloring, I guess, is tasteless, and like, what do you call it? Like flavorless or whatever. How much food coloring do you have to put in the Savannah River to turn that thing green? And summarily, how much would you have to put into the Tennessee River to turn it red? I also am guessing because I'm guessing it's easier to turn a river green than turn a river red. Doesn't it seem like that'd be true? Red is just sort of a hard color to replicate. I heard one of y'all even in the comment section earlier, you thought my DawgNation bowling shirt looked orange. Red just looks weird under lights. It just does. We had actually really good lighting last night, but red just looks weird under lights. And I'm assuming that red would also get washed out by the natural, clarity of the water. I'm guessing it's easier to turn a river green than red. Please no one do this, but if you know how much food coloring it would take, I'd be curious to know. Matt Presley says, what do I do on the weekend when Georgia doesn't play? Hey, I think there's a bunch of good games here this weekend. Also, there's a lot of pumpkin patches this weekend. A lot of pumpkin patches. Spencer Clark also reminding us that like the red dye is basically in everything. There used to be a thing that it turns your kids crazy. I don't know if people even still say that or not, but it used to be the like, you're supposed to avoid red dye with your kids because it made them act, hyper. Do people still say that? I don't even know. Let's see what else. Nature Gator, just to reiterate, I am in no way suggesting that anyone should put anything in the Tennessee River. I want that fully known here. This is just friends talking. Paul Moon's right. Yeah. We certainly don't want to antagonize any of the Tennessee fans any more than we already have. That's probably a good point. All right, let's get ready to go. Good stuff here today. Thank you for being here. Baggins and Friends says they do put the red dye in the ocean for some of these war movies where you're kind of replicating the battle scenes, which I guess if you could do that in the ocean, you could do that in anything. But we are not doing that in Tennessee because that is not something we have authorization to do. So let me once again make that very clear. I probably shouldn't have even brought that up. Alex Lundeen says, as long as I don't have to listen to the announcers for the Vandy game again, the season will be great. Lackluster with information. Yeah, I hate that. It's always challenging, and I think about this doing high school games as well, because a lot of the people watching the game are people who know those schools, those players intimately. And when you're talking about a Georgia fan base, one that knows Georgia as much as Georgia fans do, to kind of be a fly, sort of a drop-in CBS announcer, and obviously Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, know Georgia very well. Hopefully we'll have Brad on the show next week. But when you haven't done as many Georgia games, when you're not living and dying with every snap of Georgia football the way that Georgia fans are, I'm not defending any announcer, but it's always really tough to sort of slip in from out of nowhere and have to do that, just knowing that the people that you're broadcasting the game for really know more about the team than you do because they've been there. Brady C., we are not doing that. Brady C., we are not doing that, but that's funny. And Alex Lundeen, I appreciate the kind words there as well. Thank you very much. All right, y'all, we got to go for now. Thanks for being here for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all find R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. Heating system. Get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Go with the flow. Presented by R.S. Andrews tomorrow night on the DawgNation video channels, or tomorrow evening. Let's say it that way. We'll see you there for that. And then back here tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.